The cell was dark, the air heavy with the stench of metal and fear. Chains rattled each time the alien girl moved, though she was too weak to fight them. Her skin, pale silver in the faint glow of the energy bars, carried bruises and scars from days of torment. She had once belonged to a proud race, creatures of grace known for their songs and light. But now she was nothing more than a prisoner in the hands of those who thrived on cruelty. The chamber around her echoed with laughter and footsteps of her captors. Tall, twisted slavers with jagged armor leaned against the walls, whispering about her fate. They spoke of breeding programs, of experiments that would shatter her body and mind. They wanted to turn her into a tool, not a being. Their voices were sharp, cutting into her like blades. Every word pushed her deeper into despair. She closed her eyes, praying for the pain to end quickly. No one had come for her people. No one had cared when their ships burned and their homes fell. Her race had been scattered, hunted, sold to the highest bidder. And now she was the last in this place, a trophy for monsters who believed strength gave them the right to destroy. Her breath shook as the heavy doors slid open. More slavers entered, carrying weapons that glowed red with energy. They laughed as they approached her cage. "Tonight," one of them hissed, "we break her spirit. Tomorrow, she will learn her place." Their laughter grew louder, filling the chamber, drowning out the faint thud of her heart. The girl pressed her forehead against the cold bars, tears burning in her eyes. She whispered a single word to herself, a word from her homeworld that meant hope, but it felt empty now. There was no hope. Not here. Not anymore. And then, everything changed. The laughter stopped. The sound of boots echoed across the chamber floor. Steady, heavy, different. The slavers turned, weapons raised. Out of the shadows walked a figure they had never expected to see in this cursed place. A human. He was tall, broad, his body wrapped in dark armor scratched from battles, long past. His face was scarred, his jaw hard as stone and his eyes burned like fire. He carried no fear in his steps, only cold determination. The girl's breath caught. She had heard whispers of humans before, creatures from a distant world, wild and unpredictable, but she had never seen one with her own eyes. The slavers sneered. "What is this?" one spat. "A lost wanderer? A fool who walks into death?" But the human did not flinch. He looked at the cage, at the girl trembling within, and his face hardened even more. He spoke, his voice deep and cold. "Let her go." The slavers laughed. The sound echoed against the steel walls. "Let her go. She belongs to us now. She will serve us, break for us. And you, human, you will die here." Still, the human did not move. His hand rested on the weapon strapped to his side, but his eyes never left the girl. In that moment, she felt something strange, something she had not felt since before her world had burned. It was not just defiance. It was not arrogance. It was belief. This man, this human, truly meant what he said. The leader of the slavers stepped forward, grinning with sharp teeth. "Do you know where you stand, human? This is our world, this is our law. No one dares challenge us." The human tilted his head slightly, his voice calm, almost quiet. "Then you've never faced a human before." The room went silent. The girl's heart thundered in her chest. The slavers erupted in laughter again, but this time there was unease beneath it. The human stepped closer, and the sound of his boots echoed like war drums. His hand slowly gripped his weapon, and the air in the chamber grew heavy. For the first time since she had been captured, the girl felt her chains loosen, not physically, but in her mind. The fear that had controlled her for so long cracked, just a little. She watched him, and her trembling slowed. The human's eyes flicked to her, only for a moment, but it was enough. She saw a promise there, a silent vow. He was not going to let her die. The slaver leader snarled, raising his weapon. "Kill him." In that instant, the chamber filled with light and sound as the human moved faster than the girl could believe. The battle had not yet begun, but the tension was already unbearable. The girl pressed her hands to the bars, eyes wide, whispering, again the word she thought she had lost. Hope, because for the first time since her capture, she believed she might live. The slaver leader's command echoed across the chamber, and at once half a dozen alien warriors rushed forward. Their claws scratched against the metal floor, their energy blades humming with deadly light. The alien girl closed her eyes for a moment, expecting to hear the sharp scream of a dying man. But instead, she heard thunder. The thunder was not from the sky. It came from the human's weapon, a heavy rifle pulled free with a swift motion. With a roar of fire, it spat streaks of light that tore into the slavers. The first two fell before they could even swing their blades. Sparks burst against the walls, screams filled the room, and the girl opened her eyes to see a storm of violence unleashed. The human moved with precision, not wild, but controlled. Each shot, each strike of his armored fist, landed with purpose. The slavers had mocked him only moments ago, but now their eyes burned with fear. One of them shouted, "He's just one man." Yet that voice was drowned out as another fell to the ground, armor shattered, blood spilling across the steel floor. The girl pressed herself against the bars of her cage, her breath fast and shallow. She had seen warriors before. She had seen armies fight. But never like this. This was not just a soldier. It was as if a force of nature had walked into the chamber. The human fought not for power, not for conquest, but for something deeper. She could see it in the fire of his eyes. He fought because he refused to let evil win. The slaver leader roared, stepping into the fight himself. His blade crackled with red lightning, its hum shaking the walls. He swung at the human with a savage strike, but the man blocked with his armored arm. Sparks flew, the metal groaned, and the girl gasped. Any normal creature would have been cut down instantly, but the human only gritted his teeth, shoving the leader back. "You are nothing," the slaver spat, his voice full of rage. "Your kind is weak. You should bow to us." The human's reply was cold, steady, almost too calm. "Weak? Then why do you fear me?" With a roar, he drove his fist into the slaver's chest, sending the alien stumbling back into the wall. The chamber shook with the impact, dust falling from the ceiling. The other slavers froze for a moment, caught between fear and rage. The girl's heart pounded. She wanted to cry out, to scream for him to run. There were too many of them. He could not fight them all. Yet deep inside, another voice whispered, "Maybe he can." The fight raged on. Energy blasts flew through the air, scorching the walls. The human dodged, rolled, and countered, his movements sharp and practiced. A blade slashed across his shoulder, tearing through his armor. He staggered, but did not fall. Blood ran down his arm, but his grip on his weapon only tightened. He turned and fired, cutting down his attacker without hesitation. The girl gasped again. He bled, yes, but he kept moving. It was as if pain itself could not stop him. One by one, the slavers began to fall back. Their arrogance was breaking, replaced by the heavy weight of fear. This was not how it was supposed to be. A single man was not supposed to stand against them all. Yet here he was, refusing to kneel, refusing to die. The leader snarled, furious. "Enough, kill the girl. If she dies, his fight ends here." The girl's blood froze. Two slavers turned toward her cage, blades raised, their eyes hungry. She screamed, pressing against the bars, helpless. But before they could reach her, the human moved like lightning. He crossed the chamber in a heartbeat, slamming into them with all the force of a hammer. His rifle swung like a club, crushing bone and steel alike. The girl fell back inside the cage, tears filling her eyes, not from fear this time, but from shock. He had risked himself to save her. Again. The human stood before her cage now, his chest rising and falling heavily, his armor cracked and scorched. Blood dripped onto the floor, but his eyes still burned with fire. He looked at her just for a moment and spoke in a low voice. "You're not going to die here." The girl could not answer. Her voice trembled too much. Her heart raced, her hands shook. She had no words for what she was seeing. No one had ever fought for her. No one had ever defied death itself to protect her. Until now. Behind him, the slaver leader roared again, summoning more warriors into the chamber. The doors slammed open, and dozens poured in, armed and ready. The human turned his head slightly, his expression calm, even as the odds grew darker. He whispered almost to himself, "Come and try." And then, the battle began again. The alien girl clutched the bars, eyes wide. Fear still gripped her, but something else had taken root in her heart. Something stronger. Something she had thought was gone forever. Hope. The chamber was chaos. Dozens of slavers stormed in, their boots pounding like drums of war. Their weapons glowed with red energy, their snarls echoing across the steel walls. The alien girl's body shook with fear. She had seen armies before, but this was no battle. This was slaughter waiting to happen. One man could not stand against so many, yet the human did not back away. He stepped forward instead, his shoulders straight, his weapon steady, his face calm like stone. For a brief second, silence hung in, the air, heavy as the storm before lightning. Then he moved. The rifle roared in his hands, thunder splitting the chamber. Red beams cracked against his armor, scorching his side, but still he advanced. Every shot he fired found its mark. Every strike of his armored fists tore through enemies like brittle glass. The girl gripped the bars of her cage, her breath caught in her throat. She could hardly believe what her eyes saw. One human standing against a tide of death, refusing to fall. The slavers tried to overwhelm him, attacking from every side. Two rushed low with blades, one leapt high with claws, another fired blasts at his chest. But the human's movements were sharp, fast, trained by countless battles. He ducked, rolled, and countered with brutal efficiency. His rifle cracked like thunder. His knife flashed like lightning, and the air filled with screams of dying slavers. Still, the numbers pressed hard. He was bleeding now. His side burned, his arm cut deep, blood soaking his armor. The girl gasped, pressing her hands to her mouth. He can't keep fighting," she whispered. Yet her eyes refused to look away. Then it happened. The slaver leader raised a device, pressing it with a cruel grin. A hidden cage door burst open at the far end of the chamber. From the darkness crawled creatures unlike anything the girl had seen. Beasts with armored hides, teeth like jagged knives, eyes glowing with hunger. They were bred for war. For blood. Their growls shook the air. The girl's heart sank. Not even the human could fight these monsters. But the man only glanced at them, his expression cold. He wiped the blood from his brow, raised his weapon, and whispered a single word under his breath. "Come." The beast charged. The human met them head-on. The ground trembled as he fired, as he slashed, as he fought with every ounce of strength. A beast leapt, claws outstretched, but he rolled aside and drove his blade deep into its chest. Another slammed into him, throwing him across the chamber. He hit the wall hard, blood spraying from his mouth. The girl screamed. Yet slowly, painfully, he stood again. His body trembled, his armor cracked, but his eyes still burned. "I don't stop," he growled, raising his rifle once more. The girl's chest tightened. Something inside her broke free, something she had buried under fear. She clutched the bars, shouting with all the voice she had left. "Fight! Don't give up!" Her words echoed, and for the first time the human turned his eyes toward her. He gave a small nod, and then he fought harder. The battle became a storm of fire and steel. The human struck down beast after beast, slaver after slaver, until the floor was slick with blood and smoke filled the air. The girl's chains rattled as the ground shook with each explosion, each roar, each crash. Her heart raced with every strike he delivered, every time he stood when he should have fallen. At last, with a final cry, the human drove his knife into the slaver leader's chest. The alien's eyes widened in shock, his weapon clattering to the ground. He fell to his knees, choking before collapsing in silence. The chamber grew quiet. Only the hum of broken lights and the crackle of burning machines filled the air. The human stood tall, his chest rising and falling heavily. Blood dripped from his armor, but he remained unbroken. He turned toward the cage, toward the girl, and stepped closer. She backed away, her body trembling, unsure if this was real. The human reached for the control panel, his hand steady despite the blood running down his fingers. With a sharp twist, he ripped the wires free. Sparks flew, the energy bars flickered, and then silence. The cage door fell open. The girl stared, wide-eyed, frozen. Freedom was there, right before her, yet her legs would not move. She had been trapped for so long that the idea of stepping out felt impossible. The human lowered his weapon and extended his hand. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of someone who had seen death 1,000 times, but still refused to kneel. "Can you walk?" Her lips parted, her voice shaking. "Yes." "Then stay close," he said. "We're not done yet. More are coming." For the first time in what felt like forever, she stepped forward, past the broken bars, past the fear that had chained her. She placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was strong, firm, like a wall that could never fall. In that moment, the girl knew. He had not just freed her body, he had freed her spirit, and together, they would fight for freedom. The outpost was no longer silent. The moment the cage fell open, alarms screamed across the halls. Red lights flashed, sirens wailed, and the steel corridors trembled as more slavers rallied to crush the intruder. The human did not waste a second. He pulled the alien girl beside him, his voice sharp but steady. "Stay behind me. Don't stop." Her legs shook as she followed him into the corridor. The air smelled of smoke and burning wires, the walls scarred from the battle he had already fought. She stumbled once, her body still weak from torment, but his hand steadied her before she fell. Even bleeding, even broken, he moved like a shield between her and the death that hunted them. The first squad appeared at the end of the hall, weapons glowing with red light. "There!" one shouted. Blasts of energy filled the air. The girl cried out, ducking, but the human pulled her close and returned fire. His rifle thundered again, drowning out the screams of his enemies. One by one, the slavers dropped, their bodies smoking as they hit the floor. But the noise drew more. From the upper levels, from hidden passages, slavers poured in like a flood. The outpost was alive now, furious at the defiance of one man. The girl's heart raced. There were too many. They could not escape. The human slammed open a door and pulled her inside. It was a maintenance tunnel, narrow and dark. Sparks rained from broken pipes, steam hissed through the cracks. He pressed her against the wall, his breath heavy, blood still dripping from his wounds. "Listen," he said firmly. "This won't be easy. They'll hunt us at every turn. But you will live. I swear it." Her voice shook. Why do this? You don't even know me." He looked at her, his eyes sharp and unshaken. "Because no one deserves chains. Not you. Not anyone. And because I am human. We don't let monsters win." Her throat tightened. For a moment she forgot the alarms, the fire, the fear. His words struck deeper than any blade. But their pause ended quickly. The tunnel doors burst open and slavers charged in, their shadows stretching across the narrow path. The human shoved her behind him and unleashed fury once more. The walls lit up with fire and blood, the air thick with smoke. The girl pressed, her hands to her ears, trembling, but through the chaos she saw him, still standing, still fighting, refusing to fall. When the last slaver dropped, the tunnel was a graveyard of silence. The human wiped his face, his armor cracked and scorched. He turned to her, his voice quieter now. "We need to move. More are coming." She nodded, though her body screamed with exhaustion. He pulled her forward again, guiding her through twisting passages. Each corner was danger, each hall filled with shadows waiting to strike. Yet somehow he always stood between her and death. Finally, they reached a blast door, massive and locked tight. Beyond it lay the landing platform, their only chance to reach his ship. But heavy footsteps echoed behind them, dozens of slavers, maybe more. They were trapped. The girl's chest tightened with panic. "We can't," she whispered. "There's no way through." The human pressed his hand against the door panel. Sparks jumped as he pulled wires, his fingers working fast. "I'll make a way." The footsteps grew louder, closer. The girl grabbed his arm, fear choking her words. "They'll kill us." He looked at her again, his eyes steady, burning with a promise stronger than steel. "Not while I'm breathing." With a final spark, the blast door screeched open. Beyond it, the cold night sky stretched wide, stars burning above. The landing platform was massive, but empty, for now. At the far end, a small ship waited, its hull battered but intact. The girl's breath caught. Freedom was right there. "Run!" the human shouted, pulling her through the door. They sprinted across the platform, their footsteps echoing against the steel floor. The wind whipped around them, carrying the smell of fire and ash. The girl stumbled again, her body weak, but the human caught her, dragging her forward with strength that refused to die. Then came the roar. Behind them, the slavers poured through the blast door, filling the platform with fire. Energy blasts rained down, striking sparks against the floor. The girl screamed, but the human threw himself in front of her, his armor taking the brunt of the storm. He staggered, blood pouring from fresh wounds, but he did not stop. They reached the ship's ramp, and he shoved her inside. "Get down!" he barked, firing back at the wave of enemies. His rifle roared until its power cells burned out. Then he drew his sidearm, fighting on with stubborn rage. The girl crawled to the cockpit, her hands trembling as she fumbled with controls she didn't understand. "I can't fly this," she cried. "I can." His voice was hoarse but unbroken. He slammed the hatch controls, sealing the ship just as a blast shook the hull. He collapsed into the pilot's chair, blood dripping onto the controls, and powered the engines. The roar of thrusters filled the air, shaking the platform. The ship lifted slowly at first, then with a sudden burst it shot into the sky. The slavers below screamed and fired, but their blasts fell short as the vessel soared higher and higher into the dark void above. The girl sat against the wall, her body trembling, her eyes locked on the human at the controls. His face was pale, blood running down his jaw, but his eyes still burned with fire. He glanced back at her, managing a faint, tired smile. "You're safe now," he said. Her throat tightened, tears streaming down her cheeks. For the first time, she believed his words. They had escaped the cage. They had escaped the fire. But, deep inside, she knew. This was only the beginning. The stars stretched wide outside the ship's viewport, endless and cold. The engines roared as the vessel left the outpost far behind, flames still rising from the battle below. Inside, silence filled the cabin. The only sound was the hum of the thrusters and the ragged breaths of the human in the pilot's chair. The alien girl sat on the floor, her knees drawn close, her silver skin bruised and scarred. She looked at him, at the man who had torn her from the jaws of death. His armor was shattered, his chest plate cracked open, his shoulder bleeding freely. Every breath he took seemed heavy, as though his body screamed to rest. Yet his hands never left the controls, guiding the ship steady through the void. Her voice was soft, trembling. "You saved me, but you are dying." He glanced at her, his scarred face calm. "Not yet. I promised you'd live. I don't break promises." Tears burned her eyes. She had been ready to die in that cage. She had accepted pain and silence as her only future. But this man, this human, had changed everything. He had stepped into her nightmare and lit a fire she thought was gone forever. Alarms beeped across the console. Enemy signals flashed on the screen. Slaver ships were launching, chasing them across the stars. The girl's heart sank. "They're coming," she whispered. The human wiped blood from his lips, his eyes narrowing. "Let them." The ship rocked, as enemy fire struck their shields. Red lights filled the cabin, warning of damage. The girl cried out, clinging to the side of the cockpit. "We can't outrun them!" The human's voice stayed steady, even as pain laced his words. "Then we fight." He pressed controls, and hidden compartments slid open on the ship's wings. Cannons charged, glowing with power. The girl gasped. This was no ordinary vessel. This was a warship, stripped and battered but still alive. The first enemy fighter swept close. The human's hands moved with precision, the cannons roaring, tearing the slaver ship apart in a burst of fire. Another came, then another, but each time the human fought back, refusing to yield. Blood ran down his face, his vision blurred, yet his will never faltered. The girl clutched the chair beside him, her voice breaking. Why risk so much? For me. You could have left me there. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something deeper than words. Because if one life is left in chains, none of us are free. Her heart twisted. No one from her own kind had come for her. No one from the galaxy had cared. Yet this one man, this stranger from a world she barely knew, had given everything to keep her alive. The ship shook again as another blast struck the shields. Warnings screamed across the console. The human's body swayed, his strength fading. The girl reached forward, her trembling hands brushing his arm. You can't do this alone, she whispered. He gave a faint smile, tired but fierce. Then don't let me. Something inside her sparked. She slid into the co-pilot's seat, her hands shaking as she touched the controls. She didn't know these machines, but his voice guided her. There, stabilize the shields, lock the cannons to targeting. Together they fought. The girl struggled, her hands unsure, but each time she faltered, the human steadied her with his words. Blasts tore through the void, enemy ships burning one by one. She screamed when sparks rained across the console, but she didn't stop. For the first time in her life, she was not just a victim. She was part of the fight. Finally, the last enemy ship exploded in a burst of fire, its wreckage drifting into the darkness. Silence filled the cabin once more, broken only by the hum of the engines. The girl slumped back in her chair, her body shaking with exhaustion. She turned to him. His eyes were half closed, his face pale, his body nearly spent. She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. Don't leave me. Please. His fingers curled weakly around hers. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but filled with the same fire that had carried him through every battle. I won't. I told you. You're safe now. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She had no words strong enough to thank him, no way to explain what he had given her, but deep in her heart she understood. He was more than a soldier, more than a rescuer. He was human, and that meant he would fight, bleed, and die before he let monsters win. The ship drifted into the quiet of the stars. The girl sat close to him, her hand never letting go of his. She looked at the scarred man beside her and whispered softly, You saved me. But maybe you saved more than that. You reminded me what hope is. He gave the faintest smile, his eyes closing as exhaustion finally took him. Good. Then it was worth it. The stars stretched on before them, endless and waiting. The girl looked out into the void, her heart no longer chained by fear. She knew the galaxy would not understand what had happened here. They would not believe one human had shattered a fortress alone. But she knew, and she swore that she would carry this story across the stars, the story of a man who refused to let her die, the story of a promise only a human could make, and a promise only a human could keep.